Van Dorn and his team followed more leads than they could remember over the last 2 years. Nothing was found. Despite this, his gut told him that this time would be different, but he was aware that many cases like these ended badly. He saw it with his flashlight over the staircase. His heart raced with fear. He prayed for good news with a frown. After one of the stairs was wrenched open, Van Dorn's life changed. Detective Eric Van Dorn was unfazed by his job as a police officer in one of the world's most famous cities. Van Dorn worked in Saugerties, Ulster County, New York, which was a far cry from Manhattan. Nope. Van Dorn still saw disturbing cases there. By 2021, he had been a detective for years. He was unprepared for what he found under that staircase. It was more eerie and unsettling than anything he had seen as a New York City police officer. The case had always been troubling. Van Dorn and his colleagues hoped for a breakthrough early in the investigation. Their destination was unknown. The long wait ended with a disturbing discovery. That was a time-sensitive situation. After weeks and months, Van Dorn lost hope. Despite his reluctance, he had begun to worry. What if they didn't find what they were looking for and that case went unsolved forever? Van Dorn's early angles seemed promising despite the high stakes. If you like my videos, don't forget to like or subscribe. Thanks in advance. Those days, Detective Van Dorn never considered the worst. However, those fears kept resurfacing, and memories from a past case haunted him. Van Dorn previously investigated missing girls. As a Harlem police officer, the last one happened. That case was the most impactful. Even after years, the guilt and remorse tortured him. Van Dorn's mind raced day and night, considering all the case's cues and variables. 4-year-old orphan girl disappeared from Harlem foster care agency. She vanished. That wasn't the creepiest part. Van Dorn questioned and interrogated many agency staff members, but he always got the same response: silence and obliviousness. He suspected the agency's employees of the girl's disappearance soon after. Another, scarier possibility existed. What if the agency's upper management abducted the girl and terrorized the staff into silence? The case's scariest detail was yet to come. Van Dorn immediately noticed something was wrong after reviewing the agency's CCTV footage from the day the girl disappeared. That day's footage vanished. Van Dorn checked all the facility's cameras, but none had records from that day, the previous one, or the next. The day before the girl disappeared, the screen went black and stayed black for 2 days. That confirmed Van Dorn's suspicions. A foster care agency employee, likely a manager, had abducted the girl. Van Dorn was unsure where to begin. He had one major issue: no staff members spoke. In that case, the absence of evidence was proof of a problem. Van Dorn saw clearly. Police would struggle to solve the disappearance. Van Dorn received bad news after weeks of focusing on this case. He moved to Saugerties, Ulster County, New York. However, Van Dorn had his own theories. He worried about upsetting the wrong people with his girl's disappearance investigations. He had no proof, but his gut told him. Van Dorn suspected that they promoted him to detective to keep him happy, busy, and quiet. He wondered if he was paranoid when he had those doubts. He had no evidence of a conspiracy. He almost forgot the case. He felt guilty sometimes, but he quickly thought about his Saugerties cases. He was too busy to dwell on the past. However, this new missing girl case brought back memories of that Harlem case and his regret at failing to solve it. Van Dorn vowed to solve the case this time. He investigated at work. The evidence was clear. Van Dorn felt the answers were there. However, all leads were fruitless. He wondered what he missed. Van Dorn would have seen the case as a no-brainer if someone had told him the facts. They had to be. Van Dorn's leads against Kirk Jr. and Kimberly kept disappearing every time he thought he had them. This raised the unsettling possibility of another party. Van Dorn was trained to stay focused. Everyone had biases. Confirmation bias can ruin a case. It could cloud objectivity and lead him to draw conclusions based on what they wanted rather than what was. Detective Van Dorn had also learned that smoke usually means fire. Many Saugerties PD officers could empathize with the family. This made it hard not to take the case personally. Everyone's worst nightmare. 2 years had passed without a breakthrough, despite everyone's hopes. The worst part was all the tips and leads over the years dangling hope. Several tips were received over time. The leads kept pointing to a Saugerties house, 180 miles from the crime scene in Cayuga Heights. The house's residents were clearly involved. How involved were they? How guilty were they? However, comprehensive search warrants were scarce, preventing Van Dorn and his men from investigating. The tips were hearsay. Van Dorn was convinced that something was hidden despite every search of the property. Van Dorn and his men were frustrated by these legal loopholes because each search warrant allowed limited access to the house. Naturally, this complicated their investigations. Worse, police teams searching the house for clues were barred from some areas. Nope. They were always on a time limit, which limited their search. It seemed like the system was trying to hide what happened in that house. These obstacles made Detective Van Dorn more determined to solve the case. Kirk Sr. owned the house, but Kirk Jr. and Kimberly were the main suspects. He may have been involved in the case or unaware of what was going on in his home. These dynamics complicated a complicated investigation. Detective Van Dorn and his team solved the 2-year case after one last tip. The tip-off that broke the case was corroborated and led to a new search warrant for the house. Detective Van Dorn was right again. He saw his torchlight flicker against something between the stairs as he climbed the house's main staircase. Detective Van Dorn called his colleagues when he saw a blanket under a staircase crack. A special tool opened some stairs for detectives. They were astonished. A temporary room had been hidden under the stairs. Little feet were visible. After 2 years of searching, they found the missing girl. In 2019, 4-year-old Paisley Schultes disappeared from her custodial parents. Her biological parents, Kirk Schultes Jr. and Kimberly Cooper, lost custody. It appeared she had hidden in the concealed area during previous searches. The area had blankets, a pillow, and stuffed toys, indicating previous use. Paisley was healthy after treatment. Kirk Schultes Sr., Jr., and Kimberly, who was found hiding under the stairs with Paisley, were charged with various offenses. Detectives like Van Dorn were relieved when little Paisley was found safe. This case's dramatic but happy ending showed how important hope is. Detective Van Dorn and the other officers' excellent work proved this. For its happy ending, the case has garnered media attention. After seeing her custodial family, 6-year-old Paisley was happy. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in the next video.